and it's 6:30. So we'll get started with our special council meeting for August the 18th. And we do have quorum. So we'll start by opening the meeting and asking you to please put your cell phones on silent, and that we are audio and video recording this session, and it shall form part of the public record, which is retained according to the town's retention bylaw. And if you'd like more information about that bylaw, you can contact the clerk's office. So the first item on the agenda, this is a special council meeting. We're dealing with two planning matters. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the contents of the agenda. And could I have a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Waters and Councillor Nicol, all those in favor? That is carried. Are there any disclosures of interest on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, if one becomes apparent to you during the debate, please bring it to our attention. And now we'll get started with the first of two public meetings. So hello and welcome to this special council public planning meeting. Please be advised that this meeting is being live streamed and will be audio and video recorded. Also, please remember to mute your audio when you are not speaking. Tonight, we have two items on the agenda for information and public consultation purposes. No decisions will be made this evening. We'll start by hearing from town staff and then Tim Schilling from KLM Planning concerning a proposed amendment to the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw to rezone a portion of the existing draft approved El Sami P4 subdivision for a proposed Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board elementary school site. And after they have spoken, council may have some questions or provide comment. Then we will have an opportunity for the public consultation where members of the public who are pre-registered will be identified on the speakers list. And when it's your turn, I'll ask you to turn on your video and audio, and you'll have 5 minutes to ask your questions or express your support or your concerns. Then town staff will respond where possible. Should anyone need to speak for a second time to identify an issue that has not already been raised or to receive clarification, they will be provided an additional 5 minutes. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to make a comment during the meeting or ask a question, they can email or call clerk services, and the deputy clerk will be monitoring for input and will provide your comments to council and town staff during the meeting. Any comments received will become part of the public record. If you do not submit your comments during this meeting, you can still send comments and they will be provided to council and town staff. You will also be added to the circulation list as an interested party where you will be kept updated on any future information regarding this item. The email and phone number will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is also available on tonight's agenda that can be found on the town's website. We will now hear from Town Clerk, Mr. Parkin, on how public notice of this meeting was provided. Mr. Parkin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening. Notice for this public meeting was circulated in the newspaper on August 5th, 2021. And also circulated 20 days prior to this public meeting to all required agencies and to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands. Notice was also posted on the town's website and on getinvolvedinnisville.ca for review and commenting.
Thank you. Has any correspondence been received by the clerk's services concerning the proposed amendments?
Yes, Your Worship, we have received two pieces of correspondence. One from In Services dated August 18th, 2021, noting the school block appears to have an increased population count from what was previously provided and will need to be remodeled as part of the detailed design phase. And the other item from the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority dated August 18th, stating they have no objections and the proposal will require submission of a stormwater management report inclusive of water balance assessment. And Your Worship, just would like to remind members of the public, they can provide comment or register their interest regarding this application during the meeting or up until council makes a decision on the application by contacting the clerk's office. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk. We'll now hear from Stephen Montgomery, Supervisor of Development Acceleration, who will provide a high-level summary of the planning context of the proposed amendment. Mr. Montgomery, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public. The purpose of this public meeting is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment to the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw number 8013, which is the townwide zoning bylaw, to permit a new school site within the Alsemi P4 subdivision. Alsemi stands for Lefroy Settlement Area Management Incorporated, which is the landowner group of the original 4 properties in the Lefroy area, which were approved for development by the Ontario Municipal Board through the 2007 Lefroy Secondary Plan, which designated these lands for development. P4 stands for Property 4, as there are 4 properties constituting the 4 Alsemi subdivisions of the landowner group. The other public meeting this evening is the Alsemi P3 subdivision, which stands for Property 3, which also constitutes one of these 4 subdivisions making up the land holdings of the original Alsemi group, just to provide some context. So if we continue on this slide, back one, please. Thanks. The Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board has requested a school site to meet the demands of the growing student population in Innisfil. The school board has a planned opening date of September 2023 for the school. Provincial funding has been secured by the board for the site, which has associated timing obligations. On the screen is a key map showing the proposed school site location to be rezoned in the Blue Hatching, which is located east of 20th Side Road, south of Killarney Beach Road, in the settlement area of Lefroy Belle Ewart, on lands that are currently vacant and draft approved for the future residential P4 subdivision, as mentioned. The purpose of this zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone a portion of the existing P4 draft approved subdivision of Lefroy for a Catholic elementary school site, and to therefore implement the town official plan designation, which has designated this site for a school since 2018, based on a request of the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board and their school siting requirements. The current P4 subdivision, again, which was draft approved by the OMB in 2008, does not show a school site in this proposed location, and therefore a subsequent redlining of this subdivision in a future public meeting at a future date would be required to modify the subdivision itself. The school site is proposed to be rezoned and severed now, along with the severance of part of a new public collector road named McMaster Avenue, which is proposed as a temporary cul-de-sac, where the red line is on the key map, to provide access to the school. And again, this process is because of the timing requirements of the school. Next slide, please. In support of the rezoning, the applicants submitted a draft zoning bylaw amendment and the map Schedule A, which they will speak to in detail in their presentation. They've submitted a planning justification report, a potential future Alsemi P4 concept subdivision showing the proposed lotting pattern and roads with the school site now as part of the new subdivision, a draft reference plan showing the proposed servicing easements and roads, a traffic impact brief, and a conceptual school site plan. Next slide. So on a high level, the proposed rezoning of the school site is considered to meet the policies of the Provincial Policy Statement 2020, the 2020 Growth Plan, Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, County of Simcoe Official Plan, the Town Official Plan, the Innisfil Community Strategic Plan, and the zoning bylaw. The details of this analysis are in the staff report, DSR 12421. Next slide, please. Circulation to agencies and the public was conducted 20 days prior to this public meeting in accordance with the Planning Act requirements. This circulation resulted in concerns expressed respecting the traffic study, in particular its automobile versus busing assumptions and the ratio of busing versus automobile, and concerns about the concerns about the impacts of the servicing easements and construction on an adjacent property. Staff are reviewing these concerns, and I've also spoke to an adjacent property owner. Also, after this, as of this afternoon, In-Services has provided comments about the population counts for the school site and related increased water and sanitary demand. They've stated remodeling at the detailed design stage will be required to confirm if the current systems can accommodate the revised demands. and the increased design population may impact the timing of upgrades to the reservoir and booster station in Lefroy. Conservation Authority has also commented just today that they have no objections to the proposal, subject to a stormwater management report with a water balance assessment that they would review at the time of site plan application for the school. Next slide, please. So in terms of further consideration of this application, a meeting is scheduled tomorrow with the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee to further review the proposal. A standard site plan process is required for the school layout, which would be reviewed by town staff. Again, the applicant will provide more details on the draft site plan in their presentation. Staff are reviewing the pedestrian access requirements, which propose an extension of the existing multi-use path, which currently connects down the 20th Side Road to Killarney Beach Public School, and is proposed to provide a connection further along the new McMaster Avenue Public Road to this new school via new sidewalks. Staff note further committee of adjustment applications would be required to create the servicing easements to sever the school site and to sever the new road itself, McMaster, which would have its own public hearing process and would have to be approved through the committee of adjustment. Also, a future, as mentioned, red line revision application and rezoning of the existing P4 subdivision would be necessary to redesign this current draft plan approved subdivision around the school block, and this would also require another future public meeting. Next slide, please. So again, more details will be provided by the applicant's consultant. In terms of next steps, staff will review and consider all comments received and report back to council at a future council meeting, recommending whether this proposed zoning bylaw amendment should be approved. Notice would be provided respecting when the report is returning to council for consideration to all who requested notification and or submitted written correspondence for this public meeting. And that includes written correspondence on the Get Involved in Innisfil.ca website. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Montgomery. We will now hear from Tim Schilling from KLM Planning in regards to the proposed amendment. Welcome, Mr. Schilling.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready.
There we are. Sorry, pardon me, I missed it. So yes, thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and any members of the public. As noted, my name is Tim Schilling from KLM Planning Partners Incorporated, and I'm here tonight on behalf of our clients, Philren Corporation, with respect to application D14 2021-11 on your agenda this evening. As Mr. Montgomery noted, the application is proposing an amendment to the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw for the purposes of rezoning a portion of our clients' lands to permit a new elementary school for the Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board with an associated day nursery. I have about a 9-slide presentation to go through the application, and I'll try not to repeat too much of what Mr. Montgomery has said, but I'll apologize now for any repetition. So with that, if I could have the next slide, please. So somewhat difficult to read on the slide, I recognize, but as you can see, the subject lands are outlined in red, which are located south of Killarney Beach Road and east of the 20th Side Road in the settlement area of Lefroy Belle Ewart. As I've outlined in blue the entirety of the LCME P4 lands, and you can see that the subject lands for the school site are only a portion of those. The lands, as I mentioned, are located as part of the broader LCME P4 draft plan, which, as Mr. Montgomery noted, was draft approved by the former Ontario Municipal Board with conditions of draft approval on June 27th, 2008. The lands are currently vacant and have, I'm speaking now to the subject land specifically, have an area of approximately 2.2 hectares and are proposed to have frontage of approximately 101 meters along the future McMaster Avenue right-of-way, which is a road proposed through the LCME P4 draft plan. Next slide, please. You can see a little bit more about what I was just speaking about on this slide. It's somewhat difficult to read, but you can see where the subject lands are outlined in red, or sorry, in a thick black line. As part of our application, we prepared a sketch plan, which is this, which for council's benefit, as Mr. Montgomery mentioned, the original plan as it was draft plan approved did not contemplate a school site. The lands where the site is shown, or a site is shown, were lotted out for residential uses with roads running through it. And the school site was only identified as a need by the school board in 2017 and was captured in a submission for redline revisions that our office made in 2017 on behalf of our clients. This application remains on hold and has not yet been considered by council or members of the public. And I don't want to delve into that too much this evening, but this sketch plan, as Mr. Montgomery mentioned, pardon me, is helpful as it identifies for council and the public a conceptual layout of a revised draft plan as it could look once the school block is introduced, as well as the nature of some of the surrounding land uses. And as Mr. Montgomery mentioned, I want to ensure council that the plan that we're showing is conceptual. We're still considering additional revisions. So what you see here may yet still change, with, of course, the exception of the location of the school block itself. I'll also point out that a future public meeting will be required prior to council considering the red line revisions for the balance of the lands with notice to adjacent landowners. Next slide, please. This is the current zoning of the lands, and as you can see, the lands are currently zoned residential 2, exception hold, by virtue of the approval date in the existing draft plan that did not contemplate a school site. The residential uses do not permit a school or a day nursery. They permit residential uses and associated provisions related to the development of residential uses. Next slide, please. This is your official plan schedule for Lefroy Belle Ewerett, Schedule B3. And as Mr. Montgomery mentioned, you can see that the lands outlined in red are located in the settlement area of Lefroy Belle Ewerett and are designated as community space, which permits the school and the day nursery use. Please, next slide. With respect to the development which will be proposed on the lands, this next slide provides those details in terms of the size of the school and the day nursery itself, the number of pupils that will be accommodated, and the potential for future expansion. I would note that the figures you're looking at are subject to change still, as the school board have just recently retained an architect and are still working through the details of their design, which are yet to be finalized and would be submitted to the town through the forthcoming site plan approval application. But they are akin to what the school board is targeting and what we will likely see in that site plan submission. For council's reference, the school that they're proposing, or they will be proposing, is similar to that they have with the St. Francis of Assisi school in Alcona, if that helps to provide some reference for those for folks in attendance tonight. Next slide, please. As Mr. Montgomery mentioned, this is a conceptual site plan for what the school board or school site might look like. Again, the school board is still working with an architect to refine the design, but it does provide a sense for what it will look like. So it is subject to change, but nevertheless, this is a fairly accurate representation of what it will likely look like in most part. Next slide, please. We were asked, because of the nature of the application and the sequencing of the school site going forward in advance of the balance of the subdivision, we prepared a preliminary reference plan which delineates the various servicing and land use components that are required to service the school block, which I will summarize a bit for you. It's hard to see the numbers, but parts 1 and 2, the outline in blue, that is the school itself. Part 3, which is, you definitely can't see this, but part 3 is represents the road access of McMaster Avenue, where it comes in traveling in an east-west direction from the 20th side road across the frontage of the school site. That is the proposed right-of-way, which will be fully constructed with services installed for any of the lots that are being proposed along the north or south side of that road. There are parts that represent the temporary turning circles, which at the terminus of that road, McMaster Avenue, on the eastern side. And then part 7, which extends north from there, is a municipal servicing corridor along what is proposed as the future Fairbrother Court right-of-way, and that would include sanitary sewer and water main services. Part 8, which is outlined in 8 and 9, which are outlined in the orange color, are the interim stormwater management facility. Part 10, which extends east from there, is another parts 10 and 11, as they go east of the storm pond and then north up to Killarney Beach Road, are also municipal servicing corridors that would also have sanitary servicing and water line installed. The difference being The northernmost part of this, which is part 11, will have temporary access roads to the stormwater management pond. Next slide, please. So as noted, the underlying purpose of the application is to rezone the lands to permit an elementary school with a day nursery. The draft zoning bylaw amendment that we've prepared and submitted to the town proposes a number of things, and those being rezoning the lands from residential to community service to permit the school and the day nursery, to permit residential uses on the school site itself in accordance with the town's R3 and RT zones, which is permitted by the town's official plan and is being sought to permit residential uses if, for some unforeseen reason, the school does not proceed or the site becomes surplus at some point in time in the future. To reduce loading space requirements from the 2 that are required to 0, as the school board has identified that based on the nature of the deliveries that they receive and the constraints that they have on the site, they don't need any loading spaces. To permit pedestrian walkways within landscape strips to help with pedestrian movements from the front of the school to the play area at the back of the school, while trying to minimize the amount of conflict points between vehicles and pedestrians across the frontage of the site, but also maximizing the development area of the site itself. And then permitting reduced side yard setbacks for portable classrooms, which are sort of towards the south and the west side of the property, from 9 meters to 5 meters to, again, maximize the play area on the site and to reduce maintenance on part of the school board itself. Next slide. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to hear any comments or questions, and I'm available if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. I'm happy to see this finally coming to fruition, that there is an application for a school. A number of calls I've had from Al Sami and from the Sleeping Lion subdivisions, particularly for a Catholic school, have been numerous, and they have been promised for quite some time. So I'm excited about this, and I also think that I like the location, simply that it isn't on a 20th side road like some of our schools. It's off the road a little bit, and we're not, if you see what happens, and I hate to say it, but in Alcona, on holding up traffic and school zones, having it off the 20th side road will alleviate a lot of that. So I think it's a good location. I hope it goes forward. And I'm sure that a lot of people in my area are going to be excited to hear this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Berkel. Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. Just sort of looking at it in this map here, you have a turning circle at the end of the street. Will there be houses at the end of that street where the turning circle is? Because in some of our schools, we have real issues with the parent drop-off situation, and the residents in the area don't want it happening in front of their house, blah, blah, blah. So will that turning circle be adequate enough, or will there be a place where the parents actually come in off the street, this temporary cul-de-sac, and drop off their students and go back onto the cul-de-sac?
Mr. Montgomery.
Through you, Your Worship, there is a drop-off for students, for parents, and for buses on the school site off the road. The other thing is that it's a temporary cul-de-sac, so there wouldn't be any, by the time the temporary cul-de-sac was removed, that's when the housing construction would happen. That would not be obviously a permanent cul-de-sac. It would turn into a collector road and eventually continue north up to Killarney Beach Road.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you for the presentation. I agree that having it off the 20th is a good idea. Just wondering whether or not there are plans for lights. I assume there's going to be a lot of traffic coming off the 20th onto McMaster. Are there plans for lights to allow traffic to flow either way, or is it just going to be a regular intersection? Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to answer that one? 20th and McMaster, you're Speaking of Councillor.
That's correct.
Is there signalization and what would the timing be?
I get through your worship. My understanding is there's not signalization based on the traffic patterns that are proposed coming out of that. What would be a collector road onto 20th Side Road. Obviously, there is a Killarney Beach and 20th Side Road. Scott McKenzie is on this in the meeting. I don't know if he has anything to add to that in terms of the engineering department's review of the traffic studies.
Mr. McKenzie.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We're still currently reviewing it. The traffic impact brief does not identify signals at this time for the school. We are reviewing it, but we're still working on all 4 parcels of the El Sami group together on an updated, larger traffic study that could possibly incorporate signals when the housing comes in. But it's still under our peer review for comments at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, it's really exciting to have another school in our town. My question is, and I'm not sure if this is known at this time, what exactly the catchment area would be, and where are the students in this area currently going to school? Which Catholic school would they be going to who live in this area?
Would you know that, Mr. Schilling, or is that something to be determined?
Through your worship, I don't have that information right now. I have spoken about this with the school board about that. They were still, at the time we spoke about it, they were still refining the catchment area. By and large, the students attending the school will, of course, be coming from Lefroy, but I'm certain that there will be some rural students involved. There are 5 buses that they're proposing to be used to deliver students to the school. But I can certainly convey that question back to the school board and see if they can provide that information to us.
Thank you.
Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of things. I know that it was said a few times that this is a conceptual design, and many times it was said as well that this is subject to change. I just want to make sure that there would be no changes that would lose the open space or the parklands or the stormwater retention pond, obviously. Again, we're just receiving this, so just comments for staff and for the proponent. I'm just wondering, something was said, something about if the school wasn't used, there'd be an opportunity to rezone it back to residential. I'm wondering, from what I see, I don't see a change in loss of residential units. I just see a rejiggling of it. So that would possibly bring additional residential units on board. And just again, would that add numbers to this? And then obviously, as it's been stated as well, just a transportation study just for the amount of buses and stuff that are going into Killarney Beach School right now, and then what else would be turning the other way, going in the other way. So again, no answers needed tonight, but just for staff and for the proponent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Councillor Van Berkel.
Yeah, just on the signals, there's, I think, 100 meters up the road, there's a signal light right now coming out of the El Sami subdivision. So, and then there's one at Killarney Beach Road, and there's another one at the school. So that needs to be looked at pretty careful, or there'll be like 4 stoplights within, a half a kilometer, and maybe have to remove one and move it somewhere else. But I can't see that. I can't see putting more signalization in. That's just a comment.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? I have a couple of questions if I could. So I'm glad to see this is coming to the School Zone and Traffic Safety Committee tomorrow night. And so most of the comments I'm going to make right now have been generated over years of hearing complaints, not only from people who attend, parents who attend, whose children attend the school, but also the adjacent landowners. 101 meters of frontage with 5 buses. I'm a little worried about how that would work, how you'd, because we know now most parents the buses are arriving at the schools half empty and parents are driving their kids to school. So there needs to be both an access for school buses, but also a kiss and ride for parents that doesn't conflict and doesn't create chaos for the neighborhood. I totally agree that it being on a quieter street will help. But when I look at that layout, it reminds me very much of Alcona Glen with the one kiss and ride at the front and the parking down the side. And if there's some way, I don't know if we can do this, but what has happened not only in Innisfil, but also in Bradford, West Gwillimbury, is they work so hard to design a parking that works and a flow that works. And then the principal closes the parking lot, at in the morning and at night because of, conflicts in the parking lot. And what that then does is pushes the problem out to us and the town trying to find ways to mitigate these issues, because now all of the parents are parking on town streets and blocking driveways and so on and so forth. So I don't want to belabor the issue. I just want I want some thought put into how we could best accommodate not only the 5 buses, but also the parents that will undoubtedly, although we're doing everything we can to try active transportation, get kids to walk again, but it has been a challenge for sure. And speaking of walking, did I understand there's going to be some infrastructure or a sidewalk on the 20th to connect with, so that it is active transportation, so that kids could safely walk to this school? Mr. McInerney?
To your worship, that's correct. There is a trail already to the public school, and it is proposed, based on the studies which we're currently reviewing, to be extended down to the public temporary cul-de-sac, which will become the collector road. And so students will be able to walk to the sidewalk and into that school.
Great. And is there 2 entrances and exits? Is that up on Clarny Beach Road? Is that a vehicular access, or I didn't quite understand when we were talking about the different blocks? Mr. Chilling?
Sorry, I'm not. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Through your worship, I can provide a little bit of clarity there. It's not going to be a full moose intersection for members of the public to use. It will be an access road for maintenance of the stormwater facility. The only access at this point in time will be off of the 20th side road on the McMaster Avenue right of way.
Okay, and so that's a little alarm bell, maybe something we can circulate to fire and emergency services if it's okay to have a single access in and out of a school. And then finally, just if you could talk a little bit about the timing. So the school would go way before the subdivision. So how long would the school be there before houses started being built?
Through your worship, as I mentioned in my presentation, we are still considering modifications to the plan in association with our client, and we're not quite there yet. Part of what we are trying to do for the purposes of this application is try and figure out precisely where some of the revised lotting will go, so that when we are doing the service installation for the school, we can install the laterals to the property lines where they need to be to try and avoid having to dig up that road once it's been built if the locations of the lots move. So we've been working very closely with your staff to try and refine the locations and the layout of the plan itself, but we're not quite there. In terms of the timing as to when our clients would start selling houses or building houses, I don't have that information. I don't imagine that they would be waiting too long, but I know that the school has a targeted opening date of September 2023. And of course, the houses would be sometime after that, but I don't have a specific date that I could share with you right now.
Thank you. And, you know, I know it's needed and I understand the need for it. I just want to learn from the mistakes made in the past so we don't make them over again. And that would be my last comment, is that how to keep active transportation and kids safe walking to that school while there's construction going on all around them. And that's it for me. Did I generate any other questions or comments from anyone? Councillor Nichol.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, truthfully, looking at the original plan that we got online, I assumed that Street A was going all the way from Connie Beach Road and out to the 20th Side Road. If that's not a connected road and that's just an access to a stormwater retention pond, then we have a real bottleneck there, because buses cannot do a U-turn on Street B or go down to Street F from what I can see there. So that there definitely would need to be something that can help move all of those vehicles from that area, because otherwise, unless there's a roundabout at Street D, Street B, and Street A, I don't know how the buses can get back out of that area. So you definitely raised an important point there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Fowler and then Councillor Waters.
Sorry, Your Worship. I'm looking at the plans and something just kind of stands out in this, and I'm just curious as to the reasoning behind it. I noticed that the school's in the center lower section of the subdivision, yet you have this grand space on the east side, which is realistically not going to be properly utilized and if you have residents that are there with the trains going by, we're going to get a lot of complaints about the noise and whatnot due to the lack of buffer in that regard. Would it not, maybe it's just my thought, but wouldn't it not be more feasible to move the school location closer to the train tracks? You have the existing space where you can increase the roundabout. The people can come off, for example, Street A and then curve around the school, or even turn back onto Street A and then go out up Street D. Like, it gives more opportunity for flow. It's just where it's at right now. It just seems to be, it looks nice on paper, but we're already hearing problems. And you can kind of get two problems with one solution in that regard. Is that even being considered, or is this something that the developer or the school board itself wants in this location?
Mr. Schilling.
Through your worship, Councillor Fowler, I will note that the site has been chosen by the school board. It was chosen a number of years ago, but further to that, the lands are designated in this location in your official plan. So to move the location of the school at this point would, in addition to zoning amendment, require an official plan amendment. Hasn't been contemplated at this point in time. We've been focusing on delivering the zoning for the site and location as it was identified in the official plan.
Thank you. I think I saw another hand. Did I? Councillor Waters, sorry.
I was just going to mention, just as I'm just going to throw it out there as an alternative regarding the issues that the mayor has brought up, is whether or not there's an opportunity on the south end of that school. There seems to be a hedgerow, and I didn't know whether or not it was worthwhile considering bringing a road or something through the school to that hedgerow and back out to the 20th. So you kind of have an in and out to the whole place for parents, as opposed to, it seems that the only way to go is out to the 20th or into the subdivision, the future subdivision. So I just thought I would throw it out there as a suggestion, as a flow through for drop off. Thank you.
The way I'm looking at it, it shows that you can drive in there. There's a bus drop off in front of the school. My issue is that, just like what happens at Alcona Glen, buses and cars don't mix well. But yeah, so good comments, council. Thank you. So now we'll hear from those members of the public who have questions regarding the proposed amendment before council votes on receiving the report and all comments provided during this meeting. The speaking order is now on the screen. Well, and it's not very complicated. I'm not going to go on too much about how how we would go in order. So I would just call the first speaker, Mr. Leslie Pollock, to turn on your video, and we're looking forward to hearing from you, Mr. Pollock.
Good evening, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. Can you hear me?
Very
Can
well.
you see me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm excited to get a new Catholic school here in Innisfil. We're long overdue. Just to give some insight, about 10 years ago, we had a boundary review meeting to rezone our catchment areas for St. Francis and Holy Cross, because St. Francis was way over the number of students it could handle. And a lot of the students coming out of Lefroy, Bellure, Reeves Boulevard, Churchill were now bused instead of to St. Francis up to Holy Cross. And there's approximately 5 buses at this time now going in. So there's a lot of changes going to be happening, and a lot of happy parents if they're going to be able to use that school locally. I do have some concerns about the traffic going in and out from McMaster or Street 8 onto 20th Side Road. At the times of in and out of school, we'll have buses and car going onto 20th Side Road. It's going to create a lot more traffic, and this is a real big concern for me, that we should have some sort of light or relook at it. You did bring it up. The other thing is the kiss and ride and bus. We know it doesn't work at St. Francis. We know it doesn't work at Alcona Glen. We've got lots of issues at both those schools because of this. We can't mix buses with cars going in. It just doesn't happen. There's too many parents that don't respect that the buses are there and that the kids could be walking in front of the buses and not seeing it. So the kiss and ride has to be looked at in more detail, and that's probably more with the school board. But if we look at Lake Simcoe Public School, they have a very efficient kiss and ride on there, and that they did it right. And I don't want us to be doing it wrong again. We've got at least 2 schools, probably even Goodfellow has a problem there too. We need to do this right this time. We need to take that time and really have good talks with the Catholic School Board on this stuff. I realize that they design schools, but you look at the parking lot, I can see staff parking. If they go through their growth, there's not going to be enough parking for staff. There's visitor parking in the front, and the buses go there. There's not going to be enough space again. It's exactly going to look like a St. Francis. And I don't know what on McMaster in front of the school. Is it going to be no parking on that? Because we know at St. Francis we have a problem with that. And buses have a hard time to get in and out of the school because of the parking issues on the street itself. I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pollock. Have any emails or telephone calls been received by the clerk's office during this meeting?
Your Worship, we have received one comment through email, which I'll read out now, from Carlene Doyle. She's asked, how many parking spaces will be provided within the school for accessible staff and public parking? And she commented, to promote active travel, we need to note future walkways to connect the school to neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's Carlene with a K.
That's right.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the recommendation to receive the staff report DSR-124-21 and any comments provided this evening. Just before we go to that recommendation, I had one other quick question that I hoped maybe Mr. McKenzie might be able to help me with as far as traffic studies and traffic counts and how it's determined. Is it done on an average daily, annual, or do they actually take into account with schools that there's, at times when there's very heavy traffic and times when there's no traffic? Is there a way to somehow capture that in the traffic study?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. They look at rush hour traffic numbers, right? So it's not an average daily thing. They run the models during the peak AM and peak PM times and come up with the configuration based on that. So it does factor in the busy times in.
Thank you. Councillor Van Berkel?
Thank you, Your Worship, on the traffic count. And I wonder, Killarney Beach School is just, within a stone throw away from there. So it'll be pretty easy to do a traffic count, I think, if they went by the Killarney Beach School. It's been there forever and a day. And we talk about the Kiss and Ride. I mean, there's more cars that bring their kids to school, to Killarney Beach School, than I think anywhere else. And it works very well in that parking lot. There's never really any congestion there of cars. I mean, there's always room for improvement, really, truly. But, they're in and out, their circle in front is big. And, buses can get in and get out, and the cars go to the far side of it. They go in and they go out, and they can still get in between each other. So something to look at.
Thank you for that, Councillor. So mover and a seconder for the recommendation, please. Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Nickel. All those in favor of the recommendation is on the screen. Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you to everyone who's taken the time to watch this live stream meeting and presentation regarding the proposed amendment. If you have not made oral or written submissions in regards to this proposal before a decision is reached, you should be aware that the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss your appeal. Anyone who wishes to provide comment can still do so and may also register as an interested party to be contacted before this application is further considered by council. And you can do that by contacting clerk's office at innisfil.ca. Council thanks everyone for their participation. We'll now move on to our second special council agenda item, which is a proposed application to amend the Town of Innisfil zoning bylaw number 080-13 and subdivision redline revision application requesting changes to the existing draft approved El Sami P3 subdivision. No decisions will be made this evening. As with the first meeting, we'll hear from town staff and Tim Schilling from KLM Planning. And after they have spoken, council may have a few questions or provide comment, and then we will have the public consultation. Members of the public who have pre-registered will be identified on the speakers list. And when it is your turn, I will ask you to turn on your video and audio, and you will have 5 minutes to ask your questions or express your concerns. Then town staff will respond where possible. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to make a comment during the meeting, they can email or call clerk services, where the deputy clerk will be monitoring for input and will provide your comments to council and town staff during the meeting. Any comments received will become part of the public record. If you do not submit your comments during this meeting, you can still send comments and they will be provided to council and town staff. You will also be added to the circulation list as an interested party, where you will be kept updated on any future information regarding this item. The email and phone number will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is also available on tonight's agenda, which is available on the town's website. We'll now hear from the town clerk on how the public notice of this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Worship. Notice for this public meeting was provided to required agencies and circulated to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands in accordance with the regulations. Signage was also posted on the property, and notice was provided in the newspaper on August 5th, 2021, and posted on the town's website and on the getinvolvedinnisfil.ca website for review and commenting.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Has any correspondence been received by clerk's services concerning the proposed amendments?
Yes, Your Worship. We did receive 2 pieces of correspondence. One from Bell Canada dated August 17th, 2021, and the other from the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority dated August 18th, 2021, stating no objections and including standard conditions. And just another reminder to the public that they may comment or provide or register their interest regarding the application during the meeting or up until council makes a final decision on the application by contacting the clerk's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parkin. We'll now hear from Mr. Stephen Montgomery, Supervisor of Development Acceleration, who will provide a high-level summary of the planning context of the proposed amendments.
Thank you again, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public. The purpose of this public meeting is to consider a proposed zoning bylaw amendment to Town Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw number 8013, which again is the townwide zoning bylaw, and a red line revision to the existing draft approved LSEMI P3 plan of subdivision. Slide, please. Subject lands are located in the settlement area of Lefroy Belle-Ewer, south of Killarney Beach Road, east of the Metrolinx rail line, and west of Pine Avenue. The purpose of the applications are to facilitate minor changes to the LSEMI P3 subdivision, which is draft approved, and its current zoning. Current LSEMI P3 subdivision, which is draft approved for 120 single-family homes and 82 retirement residential apartment units, was draft approved in 2014 by the County of Simcoe, who was the approval authority for subdivisions at the time. The site was also zoned in 2013 by Town of Innisfil Council and supported for draft plan approval at the same time by Town Council. Slide, please. On the screen is the proposed red line revision to the LSEMI P3 draft approved plan of subdivision. In summary, 6 single detached lots are proposed to be added to the subdivision. A walkway block is proposed to change location in the southern portion of the subdivision, and minor changes to lot and block boundaries are also proposed internal to the existing subdivision and external to the existing subdivision on its periphery based on recent land acquisition by the developer approved through the town's Committee of Adjustment in the northwest and north central portions of this plan. Slide, please. So in support of this rezoning application, the applicant has submitted a draft zoning bylaw amendment and Schedule A, which they will speak to in their presentation, a planning justification report and a placemaking brief, a red line draft plan and a draft M-plan survey, a functional servicing and stormwater management report, an archaeological assessment, stage 1 and 2, supplemental groundwater monitoring water balance report, a traffic impact study, environmental impact study addendum, and a noise feasibility study addendum. Slide, please. So on a high level, the proposed rezoning and red line, which are considered relatively minor changes to the existing draft approved plan, are considered to meet the policies of the provincial policy statement, growth plan, Lake Simcoe protection plan, County of Simcoe official plan, the town official plan, Innisfil community strategic plan, and the town zoning bylaw. And again, the details of this high-level analysis are also available in the staff report on the agenda this evening, DSR 12521. Next slide, please. So circulation to agencies and the public was conducted 20 days prior to this public meeting in accordance with the Planning Act requirements. Comments received on this file include standard comments and conditions from Canada Post and Bell Canada, and no objections from the County of Simcoe. This afternoon, the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority has also stated in their correspondence they have no objections to the zoning bylaw amendment and red line revision based on their review of the supporting studies, which included the planning report, the functional servicing report, and the environmental impact study addendum. Next slide, please. So in terms of further consideration, the existing draft plan conditions, which were approved by the County of Simcoe in 2014, would be required to be updated to reflect the proposed red line revision of the subdivision. And these conditions would be presented to council in a future recommendation report for consideration when this item returns to council again for consideration. Next slide. So again, more details of this application, the details of the proposed changes will be provided by the applicant's consultant. In terms of next steps, again, staff will review and consider all comments received and report back to council at a future council meeting, recommending whether the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and red line revision should be approved and the proposed conditions. Notice would be provided respecting when this report is returning to council for consideration to all those who requested notification or submitted written correspondence for this public meeting. And that includes written correspondence on the getinvolvedinnisfil.ca website. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. We'll now hear from Mr. Schilling, representing the applicant concerning this application.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening again to yourself and members of council, staff, and members of the public. As noted, my name is Tim Schilling from KLM Planning Partners Incorporated, and I'm here tonight on behalf of our client, Ballymore Building, Innisfil Corporation, with respect to application for zoning bylaw amendment filed D14 2021-08 008, pardon me, and red line revision application D12 2007-004 on your agenda this evening. And I'm also here, I should note, on behalf of my colleague Keith McKinnon, who is the planner on record with this application, but is not able to be here this evening. The applications together propose a red line revision and implementing zoning bylaw amendment to the draft approved plan of subdivision Lasami P3, which was draft approved, as Mr. Montgomery mentioned, a number of years ago by the County of Simcoe. I have about an 8-slide presentation to go through. And again, I'll try not to repeat too much of what Mr. Montgomery has said. So I can have the next slide, please. So the subject lands are outlined in that thin red line on the screen, which, as you can see, are located south of Killarney Beach Road, west of Pine Avenue, and east of the Metrolinx rail line in the settlement area of Lefroy Belle Ewart. The Lasami P3 draft plan subdivision and the associated conditions of draft plan approval were originally approved by the County of Simcoe on February 3rd, 2014, and the lands are currently vacant. Upon draft plan approval in 2014, the lands had an area of about 29, just over 29 hectares. And as Mr. Montgomery has mentioned, which I will also speak to later, since then our clients have acquired some additional lands adjacent to the original draft approved lands, which is part of the basis for the submission of the red line revisions, which collectively have increased the total size of the parcel to just over 30 hectares. Next slide, please. Here you can see the total extent of the overall red line revisions that are proposed on the lands, which I recognize are difficult to read again, but I will provide a little more context for the major changes in subsequent slides. As you can see, the area proposed for development is located north of an existing woodland and a provincially significant wetland area. And I would point out that the red line revisions do not encroach any further south than the line that was originally established when the plan was draft approved in 2014. Generally, the red lines, which I will discuss in a bit more detail, were submitted to address comments received from staff and review agencies through the detailed technical review of the application, recommendations of a noise and vibration study, and as I mentioned, the acquisition of some additional lands by our clients, which were facilitated through the approval of lot boundary adjustment applications to the town's Committee of Adjustment in 2017 and 2021. Specifically, lands that are located in the northwest corner of the plan, adjacent to block 126, which is a seniors residential block, and then in the central north area of the plan, north of Street B, south of the existing residential uses that are there. Page 4 of Mr. Montgomery's staff report has done a good job of including a table summarizing the different changes in the lots and the blocks and areas and the differences in the unit count. So I haven't repeated them in my presentation, but in summary, the plan, as I mentioned, has increased in area as a result of the additional land acquisition by about 0.497 hectares and has added 6 additional lots with frontages ranging of between 9.75 meters and 12.2 meters for a total unit count now of 208. Next slide, please. So as I noted, I'm going to try and focus a little bit more on the major areas of where the red line revisions are occurring. This first area in the northwest corner, as I mentioned, is one of the areas where our clients have acquired additional lands, which enabled the enlargement of block 126 while maintaining the original unit count of 82, but it also facilitates the completion of lots 112 and 113, which were part lots on the original draft plan. The area shown in blue, or that I'm showing in blue, pardon me, is proposed to be rezoned from agricultural to mixed use 4 to permit the seniors housing. And the area shown in orange, the small little sliver at the south end at the back of lot 112, is proposed to be rezoned from agricultural to residential. Next slide, please. So this area, again, as I'd mentioned, is another area where our clients have acquired additional lands. That's the lands identified in blue. These were originally acquired or were acquired following approval of applications for consent before the town's committee of adjustment, and have, as I mentioned, enabled the addition of 6 new single detached lots on the north side of Street B. The area shown in blue is proposed to be rezoned from agricultural to residential, and the area shown in orange is proposed to be rezoned from one site-specific residential exception zone to another, from R2-9 to R3-4. Next slide, please. The revisions in this area, and I'm not showing the complete extent of it. I'm only sort of blown up the major area. They do extend a little bit further north, but the revisions in this area in the southwest corner of the plan serve a few purposes. First, as identified in Mr. Montgomery's staff report, the walkway, as it was originally shown in the draft plan, terminated near the boundary of the woodland or the provincially significant wetland further east, which didn't enable for the connection of any trail systems further south. So the red line proposal is to move the walkway west into its current location, where you can see there, or to the new location, which you can see there, to move it away from the proposed wetland or woodland and the provincially significant wetland, and to align it with some additional trails. No rezoning is required to affect that change. And further, there were recommendations from a peer review of the acoustical study that suggested that private lot lines of lots 103 north past lot 109 be extended to the western limit of the acoustical wall against the Metrolinx rail line, effectively half of the noise berm, to enable maintenance of that fence. And as a result, the lot lines have been extended further west, and the area shown in blue is proposed to be rezoned from agricultural to residential as a result. Next slide, please. The final area where the major area where the changes are being proposed in the northeast corner of the plan shows revisions that are required to accommodate an increase in the size of the proposed stormwater management block. The area, block 129. So the area that we're showing in blue is that area, and is proposed to be rezoned from residential to open space to permit the stormwater pond. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the full extent of the zoning, the rezoning that's being proposed on the lands. As noted, the proposed revisions in zoning bylaw amendment provide for 6 additional single detached lots within an existing draft plan of subdivision, which will help to encourage an efficient infrastructure. Help to encourage efficient use of existing infrastructure and community services. The red line revisions will also create additional future road connections to the north to provide improved pedestrian connections. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions from members of council? Councilor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just want to ask a few questions concerning the sensitive lands which are south of this development, block 131, 134, 133. Have there been any indications of how the subdivision may impact the wetlands in terms of water flow to and from it?
Mr. Schilling?
Through your worship, and I will apologize in advance. I have not been involved in this file for a terribly long period of time, but I'm certain that through the original processing of the application, environmental impact study reports would have been required, natural hazards reports would have been required, which would have identified the locations of the natural features and how they would affect the lands. It is important to note that the lands are draft plan approved today, and so the purpose of the red line revisions, as I noted before in the beginning of my presentation, is not extending the developable area of the plan further south into those lands. So we're not proposing any additional development that would cause any additional impact on the woodland or the provincially significant wetland from what was previously approved. So I would suspect that if we were to find those original reports that were submitted at the time of the original applications, they would identify what those issues are. I don't have that knowledge at this point in time. I can certainly look into it for you if you like, but unfortunately, I I'm extraordinarily new to the file. I'm here presenting it on behalf of our clients, but as I said, I'm sure that information was provided when the application was originally draft approved.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. And I'll just say, Councillor Waters, so, strictly speaking, our questions should be on the red line revisions and not on the plan as a whole, because that plan's already draft plan approved. But, definitely want to make you feel comfortable. And I didn't know whether Mr. McKenzie might have some information or might have more corporate memory on that.
Through your worship to Councillor Waters, there are policies in place, the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, that requires you to balance the water pre-development, post-development. So all of those policies are in place and have been met through the approved, almost approved stormwater management report. We are at the point right now we're actually servicing the site in the field at this point. So those approvals are all have been met that are required for there. So I'm not sure if you want a copy of those reports or.
I wouldn't mind getting a copy of the environmental report on that in terms of the drainage, because it's, well, I have two, because I know we're only talking about the red lines, but this is the first time I've seen this development. Is there impacts in terms of that groundwater moving into that wetland, and B, what are the plans from the developer for those lands south? Are they permanently, like, and one is a PSW, but that doesn't seem to mean anything these days in terms of, are they being maintained as wetlands and woodlands, or what's the future for those sites? And I realize this is a red line discussion, but like I said, I'm just curious since it's in front of me.
Yeah, we have there are groundwater monitoring wells out on the site that we have asked the developer to monitor the water now for quite a few years, and to maintain those wells through construction. So we are monthly collecting that data and recording it. So it's the monitoring will not be done until the house construction starts. So it is an ongoing monitoring process to make sure we're not impacting the groundwater and to those wetlands.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie. And there was significant amount of fill put into this property. Mr. McKenzie, can you just address the concern about, or the future of the PSW to the south?
Oh, at this point, I don't have any plans that show that that's being developed and it's being maintained as a wetland. I deflect that over to the planning department, but I believe that's in the books to stay as a wetland. Right now, what you see on those plans is what we're servicing in the field and has approved.
Okay.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, through your worship, I'll just reiterate, there was, I believe it was back in 2007 when the Lefroy secondary plan was before the Ontario Municipal Board, there was a limit of development that was agreed to, and that was where the wetland starts. So the lands that are in those blocks would be conveyed to the municipality as protected lands.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, as Councillor Waters mentioned, I believe that blocks 131 to 134 were turned over to the town as part of the subdivision. So I had no concerns with that whatsoever. I do have a question, may not be needed to be answered tonight, but as the red line revisions have changed, the original lot 64 and then 65 was part of the original rail line. As the red line revisions change, there's now a new lot between, or new space between number 68 and number 69, which is marked as number 20. Is that earmarked for access to the existing residential plan 51R 16549 as a future development? Or is that just a, I'm just curious about that, and it may not be something that needs to be answered tonight, but it's just, it seems quite obvious that that looks like a roadway to go into to backfill that property as well.
Mr. Schilling, can you tell us about block 20?
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. I was just trying to pull up the draft plan on my computer. That is a proposed road connection to the existing residential lands to the north, which would facilitate the connectivity of those lands if they were to be developed at some point in the future.
Can I ask what the big swath is through the middle of the plan? The swoopy line that goes right through the street B lettering?
Through you, Your Worship, my understanding is that is a former rail line which has been now closed. I don't know anything other than that, but that's my understanding.
Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you. Yeah, that is the old rail line that used to go out to the near the lake to pick up the ice.
Oh,
They used to bring the cars or the railway cars in with lettuce and stuff from Holland Marsh. And in the summertime, the ice was put on it and shipped out.
Okay, so that explains why it looks like a kind of a berm going through there. Thank you. Thanks for that. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, this is now when we could hear from members of the public who have questions regarding the proposed amendment. However, we do not have any registered speakers this evening. So I'll ask the clerk if any emails or telephone calls have been received by the clerk's office during this meeting.
Your Worship, thank you, Your Worship. No emails or calls on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last thoughts from council before we move to the recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Schilling and Mr. Montgomery, for your presentations tonight. And we'll now move on to the recommendation to receive staff report DSR 12521 and any comments provided this evening. So could I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time to watch this live stream meeting and presentation regarding the proposed amendment. If you have not made oral or written submissions in regard to this proposal before a decision is reached, you should be aware that the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss your appeal. Anyone who wishes to provide comment may still do so and may also register as an interested party to be contacted before this application is further considered by council. Please contact the clerk's office at innisfil.ca. Council thanks everyone for their participation. So now we'll move back to the special council meeting and we'll go to the confirming bylaw. And that would be moved by Councillor Ices and seconded by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That is carried. And next is our adjournment. And that's moved by Councillor Nicol and seconded by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks everyone for your interest if you're watching online, and thank you, council, and we'll see you next week.